Originally, Jeff Bezos named his little online bookstore Cadabra, but after receiving feedback that it sounded too much like cadaver, he turned to the A section of the dictionary. He landed on Amazon, thinking it fitting that the world's largest bookstore be named after the world's largest river. But while Amazon Inc. grows spectacularly, the Amazon rainforest shrinks. And the activists who agitate against that deforestation, many of them indigenous, take their lives in their hands. According to the nonprofit Global Witness, 145 activists have been killed in Brazil since 2015 alone. Suzanne Pelletier, Executive Director of Rainforest Foundation, is here to talk about the life or death struggle for the Amazon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So this is something that, shockingly, not too many people know about, that not only are activists in Peru, Brazil, other parts of the Amazon waging a war for the rainforest, but often they're paying for it with their lives. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about the current landscape.
Yeah, these are people, you don't read about them in the paper. They're not the presidents or members of Congress. They don't have that sort of power. But yeah, about 4 people a week are being killed around the world for trying to protect their rights.
4 people a week.
4 people a week, yep. Environmental and human rights defenders.
HuffPo had an article recently where it reported that statistic, and it said, the title of the headline is, 4 environmental activists are killed every week so we can have snacks, meat, and coffee. What is that about? Like, what, snacks, meat, and coffee? Is this because agribusiness is behind these murders?
Yeah. Well, agribusiness is the biggest source of deforestation around the world right now, large-scale agribusiness. And a lot of times this is happening in countries where there's a lot of corruption, where the communities where the activity is happening don't have official rights to territories that they may have lived on for thousands of years and protected, and all of a sudden there's bulldozers coming in and destroying the forests where they get their food, their medicine, their livelihoods. And so a lot of times people, if they don't have official rights to that land, they have to do whatever they can, and they put themselves at great risk up against very powerful forces. And a lot of times most of the people that are killed are by illegal mafias, organized crime.
So these are assassinations.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And the mafias and organized crime, do they have ties to the government? Do they have ties to corporate interests? Both?
It depends. I mean, sometimes both, sometimes not. But yeah, in this area, there's incredible impunity in these areas, and everybody knows they're never going to go to jail. No one ever gets prosecuted for these crimes, unfortunately. And so because you pair that with corruption in a lot of the countries where this is happening, especially in very rural areas, very far from capitals and places where there's a lot of law enforcement, this can sort of get swept under the rug, or if it is brought to local officials, if there is any corruption, they can choose not to prosecute or not to investigate what's happened.
So at one point, a huge cause of deforestation was extractive industries. Right. But now agribusiness, cattle ranching, I believe, is the main cause of deforestation of the Amazon. Is that right?
Right.
And are there any plans to slow the spread of ranching in the Amazon, or are governments complicit in this?
Brazil did make progress. I mean, recently, obviously, there's with the new president, everything is up in the air. What's going to be happening?
The Trump of the tropics.
But before that, I mean, Brazil was an incredible success story. I mean, they did a lot of right things. They matched technology for tracking deforestation with really effective public policy that was actually enforced, which is a big issue. You can have, rules on the books and regulations on the books, but unless they're enforced, nothing's going to change. But Brazil really made an incredible effort to prosecute people and fine people that were deforesting illegally. They attracted foreign investment by the Norwegian government. They would pay Brazil if Brazil stopped deforesting. So there was $1 billion that the Norwegian government had up for grabs for the Brazilian government if they proved that they were decreasing deforestation. And they decreased their rate by 70%
Wow.
in the mid-2000s.
And they also had fairly progressive programs to officially restore land rights to certain
Right.
indigenous communities if they could demonstrate that they had been on that land forever.
Absolutely. And that was a huge part of what happened. Thank you for bringing that up. Because about half the Amazon is protected in one way or another through parks or indigenous territories. In Brazil, it's about 25% of the Amazon is under indigenous control. But communities may have lived there for thousands of years, but the government during that time, about 15 years ago, started titling those territories and actually giving rights to the indigenous people. And once they did that, it shows that it works for stopping deforestation.
Yeah. If people care about the environment and global warming, why should they care about indigenous land rights?
Because deforestation is 2 to 3 times lower on indigenous lands. So if you give the rights to people that have a vested interest in that territory, it's given them everything. It's how they get their food, their medicines, their livelihoods. They have a vested interest in protecting it.
The activists who are killed at the rate of 4 per week,
Yeah.
are many of them indigenous?
Yes. A disproportionate number of them are indigenous.
Tell me about one of them.
Yeah. There's a man who's named Edwin Chota. He was from Peru, the Peruvian Amazon. And he and his community of Soweto, they had been trying to push the government for 12 years to give them title to their territory. The government kept dragging their feet, and they were invaded by illegal loggers. And in 2014, 4 of the leaders of that community were killed for making waves. Basically, they were killed by illegal logging mafias. The community was left leaderless, and so for the 4 widows of those men that were killed, including Edwin Chota, became the official leaders of the community, and we've been supporting them over the past few years to try to help them access justice. Right now, they're a global example of what's happening around the world with communities that are remote, that don't have access to the justice system. Even if there is a set system within the country, just going to and from the capital to file for their case is an incredible hardship for the communities.
Right. And that's why these mafias have been operating with impunity for so long.
Exactly.
And are governments receptive? Are you finding that the Peruvian government is interested in moving ahead with prosecuting these individuals?
The case has been ongoing. I mean, it's 4.5 years now. We're making progress, but it's very, very slow. I mean, through pressure, including international pressure, after a couple of years, the government did grant to the community legal title to their territory.
That is a success.
That's a success.
Yes.
Unfortunately, 14 years
Right.
and 4 people being killed, but they have their title now. Yeah.
As a global North consumer of beef, of coffee, myriad other things, am I complicit in this?
Unfortunately, we're all complicit. I mean, half of the fast food products and packaged goods in the stores have palm oil in them. So palm oil alone, which is driving the majority of the deforestation in Asia and is also creeping into Latin America now. That cheap oil is pushing deforestation. So as a consumer, you can look at your labels. You can also, as a citizen, put pressure on companies. I mean, a lot of companies are making claims recently that they're going to have a palm oil-free or deforestation-free supply chain. It's been a lot of talk so far, but as a consumer, you can really push companies to do the right thing. We shouldn't have to make a choice between a snack food and the rainforest.
Right. Let's get back to talking a little bit about the new president of Brazil, President Bolsonaro. He recently shifted regulation of indigenous lands and put them under the oversight of the Ministry of Agriculture.
Yeah.
Why is it significant, and what does it mean?
Yeah. The biggest driver of deforestation in Brazil is agribusiness. And so to me, it's a bit of a conflict of interest to have the Ministry of Agriculture making regulations.
So familiar.
Yeah, it's a huge conflict of interest. There's a very big agricultural lobby in Brazil, in Congress, as you can imagine, not too dissimilar from the United States. And so it's really problematic to put that power back into the hands of people that are benefiting from the destruction. Yeah.
And you recently were in Peru. Can you tell me a little bit about the work that you were doing there and anything that maybe gave you hope?
Yeah. The situation in Peru is a country with the fourth largest amount of forest. And the issues are very different. Agribusiness is not the big driver of deforestation. It's more small plots of land, so 4 hectares and under, like smaller plots. One of the big drivers is cutting down trees to plant coca for cocaine production. Peru is the biggest exporter of cocaine, producer of cocaine in the world now. So a lot of the communities that we're working with are facing a lot of threats because of that production. And you can imagine the illegality, the threats that communities are facing from that whole supply chain and people involved in that industry. So what we've done is we're working a lot with training communities to use technology. It's very easy and cheap with Google Earth to track deforestation. And so in almost near real time, you can see where deforestation is happening. And so we've been training indigenous technicians to learn how to analyze that satellite data to pinpoint where that deforestation is happening on indigenous lands, and then bring that information to local communities. And we've trained local communities to then have apps on their smartphones that they can go and actually investigate where the deforestation is happening, collect evidence, and then bring that evidence to their community to decide what to do, and bring it to the government to push for law enforcement to take action.
And how do you mitigate the danger that may present itself to indigenous people who see that somebody's planting cocaine on their land and they're going to go investigate?
They're very courageous people that see it's a balance for them between the personal risk that they're taking and then the risk to themselves or their community if they don't take action. On a small scale, we also have trained them to use drones, because sometimes if you do see that there's deforestation happening, if you're kind of worried about who's there and who's doing it, at least using a drone the first time, you can collect the evidence without having to confront anybody.
Well, there's our tie-in to Amazon Inc. Drone usage. Our future, and the future, our future as humanity is tied up in the future of these courageous indigenous activists working in the Amazon. So thank you so much for sharing their stories with us, Suzanne.
Thank you for having me.